All right, well, as people continue to roll in, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening. I'm Madison Sutton. I'm the Social Innovation Program Manager at the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and welcome to the 2020 Social Innovation Challenge Kickoff. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which is also known as the OEI for short, is a community for all disciplines at the University of Arkansas. Our team is 100% focused on students and creating experiences like this one that help students to develop an entrepreneurial approach to solving problems. Though through the Brewer Family Entrepreneurship Hub, Macmillan Innovation Studio, the Startup Village, and now through all of our virtual channels, we provide free workshops and programs, including social and corporate innovation design teams, venture internships, competitions, and startup coaching. We offer on-demand support for students who will be innovators within existing organizations and entrepreneurs who start something new. The Social Innovation Challenge is one of those OEI programs that's designed to connect interdisciplinary student teams with pressing social and environmental problems affecting our communities. So the idea is to create awareness on the nature and complexity of these issues and come up with creative solutions that are viable, sustainable, and potentially scalable. We are thrilled to have all 22 of you so far here to kick off our event. This is our kickoff event for the semester. After the panel, I will give an overview of this year's Social Innovation Challenge program and how you as students, as faculty members, as community partners, or others who are interested can get involved this year. So tonight, you'll hear from a panel of experts who are in the trenches of social impact in Northwest Arkansas. You'll hear more from them later in a few minutes, but for now, I'm going to give a brief introduction. So our panelists include Dr. Rogelio Garcia Contreras, who is the founder of the Social Innovation Challenge, and as faculty in the new SEVI department at the U of A, has taken the lead in developing exciting new interdisciplinary initiatives focused on social entrepreneurship. For example, specifically the University of Arkansas's Global Changemakers program. We also have Alyssa Snyder, who is the co-founder and chief seeder with Seeds That Feed, an organization that works alongside farmers to move excess food to families and individuals who wouldn't normally have access to it, making eating healthier a reality for thousands. We also have Tiffany Hudson, who is the executive director for Partners for Better Housing, which is a nonprofit developer of quality, attainable housing whose mission is to provide this housing to moderate income families and low income families that live in Northwest Arkansas. And then finally, we have Dr. Emily English, who is an assistant professor at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, where she directs access to healthy foods research and programming with a particular interest in utilizing local food system strategies to improve the food environment and diet quality while reducing chronic disease and food insecurity. So before we get started with tonight's event, I would like to introduce to you Deb Williams, who is the Director of Student Programs at the OEI. Deb, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to be here. 100% grateful to work with the amazing team in the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And Madison, I've worked with the Social Entrepreneurship Initiative for a long time under Rogelio's leadership, and I'm super excited to be able to work with Madison and Rogelio again this semester as we kick off our 4th iteration of the Social Innovation Challenge. So I am here tonight to support the program, and I'm going to also facilitate the Q&A as we continue to move this panel forward. So I'll kick it back over to you, Madison, and thanks for having me here tonight with you guys.
Thank you, Deb. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to all those questions that will come in later. Thank you for your help with that. Before we get started, I also want to say thank you to Kraft Heinz for sponsoring the Social Innovation Challenge over the past few years. They're a wonderful company to partner with, and they are laser focused on solving the issue of food insecurity globally. They've done amazing work regionally with the Northwest Arkansas Food Bank, and they've supported our student teams in this program in so many ways. So just big thank you to Kraft Heinz before we get started. Now, with that being said, let's get started on the panel. Now, the reason that we planned this panel for our kickoff is because our kickoff event is an experience for students to understand what our community partners are really dealing with. From a bigger picture perspective, how COVID-19 is changing our world, our country, our state, but also how are people being impacted locally? How have their needs changed since the onset of COVID-19 in March to where we are today? Each organization sees problems in a very different way, and their knowledge and experience is truly what makes this program special. By connecting them to students for the challenge, students have access to the issues from a local perspective and can begin the journey of creating tangible impact. This year specifically, the challenge is focused on how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted and dramatically changed our way of life. The panel tonight will speak on how COVID-19 has impacted their work that they do and the communities they serve. So let's get started. Rogelio, Alyssa, Tiffany, Emily, thank you for being here with us. Would you guys mind briefly introducing yourself and the communities that you work with? Rogelio, would you kick us off?
Sure thing. Thank you for such a kind introduction, Madison. Deb, thank you for being here and making this possible. My name is Rogelio Garcia Contreras, and I am a clinical faculty at the Strategy, Entrepreneurship, and Venture Innovation Department with the Walton College, and I work along with my co-panelists and many others in the community on issues related to social innovation and social entrepreneurship. Thank you all for being here as well with me.
Thank you, Rogelio. Alyssa, how about you next?
Hello, everyone out there that we can't see. This is kind of fun. So it's good to be here. My name's Alyssa Snyder. Like Madison mentioned, I'm with Seeds That Feed. And so we work, as far as communities we work with, so just to tell you what we do real in a brief nutshell, we work to get healthier foods, especially excess foods, and make those accessible foods for those that need it most throughout the Northwest Arkansas area. So that, you know, translating into the communities we work with, that could be just about anyone who finds themselves in need of some healthier access to food. So those experiencing food insecurity, patients experiencing chronic illness, those that frequent food pantries and access to other services, various neighborhoods throughout the Washington, Benton County areas. So really it could be anyone and anywhere. We kind of just try to dive deep into where the most need is. So I will pass down.
Thank you, Alyssa. Tiffany, how about you next?
Thank you for having me. Like you said, I am the Executive Director of Partners for Better Housing. We're a nonprofit real estate developer. Our first project is in South Fayetteville. It's a neighborhood called Willow Bend, and it will be what's called a mixed income community, which means some of the homes will be sold to market rate buyers. Some of them will be sold to buyers that are considered moderate income. And then we do have some funding to assist some buyers that would be considered lower income. So that's what we're working, and we're hoping to grow the organization to scale to create more projects around the Northwest Arkansas region.
Thank you, Tiffany. And finally, Emily.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily English, and I work at UAMS here in Northwest Arkansas. And we do a lot of research and programming focused really on many of the same populations that Alyssa and Tiffany serve day to day. So our work is focused on really trying to create an environment that ensures they can live their best health, their healthiest life. And so that spans, a lot of our work focuses on diet quality and addressing food systems, you know, again, trying to reduce chronic disease, but also focuses on maternal child health, focuses on physical activity, focuses on access to healthcare. And so we have a whole team of folks really committed to community-based and community-engaged research and programming that kind of engages those end users or these community members in the programs, the development of solutions that work best for them. And then also really trying to make sure that we're focused on the providers who are doing that frontline service work to make sure that they have what they need in terms of capacity, resources, tools, knowledge, and are able to provide that those services to the best of their ability to.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. We're glad to have you here as well. So, in my opinion, the boots on the ground work being done in our communities is arguably some of the most valuable work being done right now. Can some of you give me an example of a situation that represents the resilience and the strength of people in the communities that you work?
I'm going to defer to Alyssa and Emily because my project is still very much in the construction stage. So I can speak to the broader issues of coming evictions and all of the myriad problems associated with homelessness and evictions and housing. But I don't have a lot of day-to-day boots on the ground work other than surveyors and concrete contractors.
Well, Tiffany, I think I have a good question for you to start us off then. So what do you see in your day-to-day that is, broken in the current system and that there isn't a solution for yet? I mean, whether that's in the context of evictions, homelessness, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, the CDC made an announcement, it was either yesterday or the day before, that they were putting a halt on all evictions for the rest of this calendar year, which is, it's a stopgap. It's such a small measure with no teeth and no money. It doesn't address, don't get me wrong, I'm all for the pushing out, kicking that problem down the road a little bit until we have better solutions. I'm glad at least that was done, but it doesn't address the late fees that are accumulating for the renters or homeowners that are in these housing units that becomes like payday lending or borrowing from loan sharks, where it gets to the point where you will never pay it off and you can't get ahead of that. So something has to be addressed there. But not only that, it's, landlords, the big and the small, but mostly the smaller landlords that own one or two rental houses, there is this perception in the world that they own houses outright, and they don't, by and large. They have mortgages that have to be paid. So if the renters can't pay that, then the landlords can't pay their mortgage, and so the house is still lost and the renter is still evicted, and then the bank becomes the owner. And then I worked through the 2008 economic downturn, and if a bank forecloses enough houses, the bank goes. So it becomes this just epic snowballing effect when you have these catastrophic economic events. And so finding a way to address that, and the best thing I was on a call the other day with the Fayetteville Housing Authority, and we were talking about how, especially in Fayetteville and South Fayetteville, there's this fantastic community of people, just individuals willing to support each other and share food or share diapers or share lawn mowing or go and run and buy groceries for someone that can't go out. And it's this feeling that the least among us share the most. And if we could find a way for for banks and landlords and employers and everyone to share the pain a little bit more equitably. That's got to be the solution to what will eventually be an epic homelessness and then healthcare crisis.
If I may jump in, Madison, just very briefly, what Tiffany has just shared is very important, and I think connects really well to your first question. When you take a look at the data that an organization like UARK, Northwest Arkansas, collects or has been collecting since COVID started, by far, the most pressing problem that households face is housing. The ability to keep their homes, to stay at their homes, to keep paying rent, to keep paying their mortgage, by far is the most pressing issue that they mentioned. So when you ask about the resilience and the strengths, I think Tiffany was very right to defer to Alyssa and Emily, because they themselves represent this resiliency and this strength that our community is all about. Because this brainstorming about viable and sustainable solutions to problems demand creativity and disruptive innovation and all these things, but it also requires empathy. It requires solidarity. It requires awareness. And this is not a minor requirement. We need to care about these issues, because otherwise the world will continue to be a dangerously divided and isolated set of contrasting realities. So when we don't care about these difficulties and their origin, all the positive and wonderful things we account for are nonetheless implicated. And this is why I believe Alyssa and Emily truly represents the resiliency and the strength of our community through the work they do. So if they can talk a little bit about it, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, Alyssa's definitely, you don't have to take yourself off mute. Because I'm gonna, I feel like, the work that we do is really designed to uplift organizations like Seeds That Feed, that are very much day to day out there with and of and a part of the communities that they're also serving. And I think we have a lot of stories just from during COVID of Alyssa and Seeds That Feed and her team stepping in every time we call to say, we're hearing this need from the community. Can you pick up this food and get it here tomorrow? We have this donation that somebody called. We have a farmer who's got food. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What is your capacity to move this stuff? And so in addition to having kind of these boots on the ground, ears on the ground that we have on our team, that Alyssa has on her team, Tiffany, that you have on your team, especially with the Housing Authority, being able to share that information and share those resources and create a network that can respond rapidly, I think is one of the most important parts of resilience. And I think COVID has really brought to light a lot of those relationships, a lot of those pivoting relationships where they didn't interact or they interacted in a certain way before, now interact differently. And so I think we'll see a lot of new solutions and creative opportunities that come out of this. So I have some very specific examples we can share, but I think Alyssa probably has many as well, and potentially even some of the same ones. So I'll turn it over to you, Fred.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, tons of stories. I think when, in March, there was a period of like, just pure chaos and just, everybody knows, everybody experienced it. And so I think through that, as Emily mentioned, there was just, it's hard for me to even just really grasp onto specific examples, because I felt like every single day was sort of a showing of resilience in everyone stepping up and doing, doing what had to be done, So we work with, one of the things that came to light for us that we could help out with was, and based on a model we'd already been developing, was this getting food directly to people. So in food and accessing food, there's, getting the food to people or people to the food is always, there's always barriers in there, and those can be a slew of different things, transportation, mobility issues, illness, people just maybe not even wanting to, seek out help, and sort of lots of always thinking about dignity. And so I think that there were so many solutions that kind of stepped up. People, for example, one of the partners we work with is ACOM, which is the Arkansas Coalition of Marshallese. And I think that there's so many great examples within their community, especially how much they've really suffered the most throughout this. And, the director, Melissa, delivering, we worked with her to get food out. And, sometimes she'd have 40, 50 homes that she was personally delivering to that day, food that we were working out, just because we know, she knows it needs to get done. And it's that important that people need food. We work to identify and open up accessible food through the farmers markets. So allowing for people to order online, and then Seeds That Feed provide a free service of getting that food to their home. So Emily and the UAMS team made that a reality for us to be able to do, supported us to be able to get that off the ground. And, through that, I can't tell you the number of stories of people that, things we just really take for granted, like being able to go to the grocery store or access food when we need it. And it's just not the same for so many people out there. And so I think we learn new things every day, and we learn how to be better and to be more, you see things through other people's lens of reality every day. And it's a very humbling experience, and it's also a great opportunity to be able to figure out how we can better, help the communities around us. So,
I think we're also seeing it in the healthcare space, where we need safe, comfortable places for people to ask for help. So in the food space, I think we've seen that happen. I think in the contact tracing, case management, questions about testing that you need answered in your own language. We've seen similar organizations to ACOM in the Marshallese community, but also the Latinx community, step in and be able to fill those gaps when they see their communities and community members in need, and they need a safe place to be able to go. And so I think that that's also been a sign of resilience and strength of people in these communities, and also a vital public health response if we're going to get in front of this and move to the other side of it.
Absolutely. Great answers, guys. Thank you. So for my next question, Emily, you actually touched on this a little bit already, which is perfect. But when we look at these issues, especially Rogelio has always talked about how they're all interconnected, right? In addressing the issue of food insecurity, you must also consider affordable housing, access to healthcare, all of the other issues, they all work together. So could you talk more about why this is so important and how it plays out?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's all very interconnected. And I think it is, you know, these basic necessities of life, right, that require time and energy and attention, money. When you only have a limited finite amount of those things, you have to make choices, and inevitably there are trade-offs. And you know, for us in the food space, in the food security space, that means oftentimes unhealthy food is traded for healthy food. It means sometimes that food is you know, is not selected so that people can purchase the medicine they need to manage their chronic illnesses, or they will feed their kids instead of themselves. They'll pay for rent or utilities over food, or food over rent or utilities, or medicine over rent or utilities. And all of these things are this fragile web that are required in order to be able to function at your highest self. And when that is so fragile and vulnerable, things like COVID, things like unemployment, things like, you know, rent payments and a missed 2 days of work can throw that whole web off. And so I think that when Rogelio talks about interconnectedness, that's what I think about when I think about that.
And specific to our immediate COVID-19 concerns, when you're facing eviction or you know it's inevitable, so you try to be proactive, something about it, likely you move in with friends or family, and that increases the number of people living in one space. And likely as not, those people are working in environments like the chicken plants or others, or warehouses, or anywhere where they're coming into a lot of close contact with their fellow employees. And as we've seen over and over again all over the United States, those work environments become spreader environments. And if you're coming home to one family member as opposed to 5 roommates, I mean, that it just snowballs the health fear and concern and issues that happen when you can't afford the home that you're living in. And equally, if your home is, if you can only afford the least expensive and your home is just falling into disrepair, that affects your health as well. Whether there's mold growth, or your heating and air isn't working properly, or I mean, all of that is all tied into the health responses that come out of affordable housing that's less than what should be considered safe and secure.
Housing and access to housing and access to food are just symptoms of much larger structural problems. There is a very interesting statistic that when I learned about it, it was like so shocking to me. Like, we talk about 2 to 3% unemployment in Northwest Arkansas for a long period of time. I mean, we are doing really good when it comes down to that variable, that economic variable, in relation to the rest of the nation, in relation to the rest of the world. Despite COVID, we're still doing good in terms of unemployment rates. But when you take a look at the number of households living under the line of poverty or below the national median income, it's alarmingly high. So this means that there's a lot of individuals that are out there employed, but not being able to access a dignified wage, right? They are the so-called Alice individuals, those that are working, but with an income that is not enough to pay for basic needs. So we cannot continue innovating under the same structural framework that has created a lot of the prosperity we enjoy, a lot of the wealth we enjoy. This prosperity, yes, it is there, the wealth is there, but we should not forget that a lot of the injustices and inequalities that we all know and many suffer are also the product of this same system. So the fact that the system we live in has created so much prosperity and wealth doesn't mean that it is a system that should be exempted from correcting all its shortcomings and failures. So the unprecedented wealth and prosperity of some rest on the shoulders, in my opinion, rest on the shoulders of all the systemic injustice and inequality endured by many. So our vision on design, on technology, on innovation, on entrepreneurship has to be tied with our vision and active advocacy in favor of a more compassionate, fair, and equal economy.
Right now, in the entirety of the United States, if you are working a minimum wage job, there is nowhere in the United States presently you can afford a 2-bedroom apartment for less than 50% of your income. And if you spend 50% of your income on the roof over your head, then you're making the choices Emily talked about, where you're choosing not to buy your medicine in exchange for buying food for your kids, or vice versa. And that was pre-economic and COVID crisis. Those were numbers as of January 2020. And so, yes, Northwest Arkansas is very privileged compared to some other places in the United States, and then of course certainly within the world, but it still has that statistic, is still accurate even for here.
Those are great points and great insight. Thank you for sharing that. Alyssa, do you have something?
Oh, I was just, I like to always at one point or another throw in, and I think it's something too that the reason I like to bring it up is because as a college student myself, I didn't really always, I ought to be honest, I just didn't really know a lot about food insecurity. I didn't really realize that it was happening all around us, especially here in an area where it doesn't seem. And at the time, back when I was in school, you know, it was even less sort of obvious. And so I think just like the interconnectedness of it is, and I think I'm trying to remember the question, but, you know, the faces of food insecurity are just as varied as anything else. So it may be, you know, we all know so many people, and it's not something that's obvious. It's not a particular look, or it's not a particular field of jobs, or people living here or people living there. It's everywhere. And so I think just knowing and learning that it could be anyone. It could be your friend and you don't know it. It could be your neighbor. It could be the person sitting next to you in class. It could be this person that's, you know, that is serving your food at the restaurant. You know, people working multiple jobs. It's just, there's so many different facets and faces to this problem. And, you know, oftentimes I think food and, you know, lack of food and hunger and being able to access good food is just, you know, a bit of evidence that we see of probably quite a few or many other things behind that. And so all these social issues that we're talking about and dealing with are very much all interconnected, and one may present itself at one point and then it may present itself here at another point, but they're all interconnected and they're all underlying, and they're all things that we have to work together to, more of a holistic approach to be able to start figuring out how we can address these areas as they're surfacing. So something I like to kind of bring up at some point, especially when get in front of some students, because it was things that I never understood at this.
Absolutely. That's a very important perspective to be exposed to on campus, because I think sometimes we get in our university bubble and we assume that everybody has the same as us or sometimes better, but it's not always the reality. So thank you for bringing that up, Alyssa. My next question is actually for you, so this is perfect. You've been involved in this program since its inception, so can you share some examples of maybe a project that a student has created that you've implemented at Seeds That Feed?
Sure. So we had a really good one. Our first, it was either the first or the second social innovation challenge. I can't remember now. I think it was maybe the first, but we connected with a wonderful human being named Laura Wasson. Oops, I just muted my. Who was very passionate and was diving in herself into some research about the effects of food on expecting mothers. So, right off the bat, you don't see like the big picture of what we do, moving excess foods and stuff, but we worked together with her to design a solution to work with mothers through the WIC clinics here. And when I say we designed, she designed, we just help facilitate things in order to study the micronutrient levels of the effects of a healthier diet on the child, the fetus. And so we spent, we continued to work on this project even after the challenge. She actually won the challenge that year. But we worked to provide access through the WIC clinics to fresh vegetables. And then she went through and did her research. She actually wrote her thesis on her findings through that, and just showing, the positive effects of, even when you don't even, you think about, I need all this extra food, but really even a cup of greens in your diet in a day can have a huge effect on the micronutrient levels that you're receiving, and then as an expecting mother, in turn your child is receiving. And so that was a really cool project to be a part of, and something that we wouldn't have ever necessarily been a part of, without her brilliant mind bringing that and allowing us to work together on it. So.
Excellent. Thank you. And if I may, I'd love to ask the same question of Rogelio. If you have any specific examples of student projects that, came from the classroom or from the college and grew into something bigger, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, definitely. I think there had been some examples through the years that started very small with ideas that at the moment seem to have a very humble impact. But I think in a way, some of these ideas have inspired either our partners or our students to continue pursuing and growing for more substantial impact. Maybe sometimes not even for the same organization that the idea was developed, or sometimes not even by the same student that developed the idea. Some come to mind with the hydroponic system that a group of students from environmental science, I believe, environmental engineering developed for tricycle farms. The project that a couple of students developed for the city of Fayetteville to pursue, to start a pilot with restaurants to pursue citizens to reduce the amount of food that we collectively waste, and be informed about ways through which we can process this food and collectively go from the roughly 40% that we currently waste to a lower number that is less inefficient and shameful, frankly. Other ideas have come out of the class with incipient of this process of the Social Innovation Challenge, or the classes that are connected with incipient ways to incorporate individuals, to better ways to gain job skills, and then it developed into something really cool that is now more technologies with Canon, Reeves, and Peyton, who were in the class talking about ways in which we could train adults in learning how to code, and that's how that idea started. Now, their company doesn't look much like that original idea, but that's, I guess, the journey of entrepreneurship and all the learning process and the pivoting that happens. So I feel actually your question took me a little off guard because I feel actually bad talking about some and not others. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, and I'm sure I'm forgetting other initiatives that, even though never made it into something concrete, certainly contributed to processes for some of our community partners that they have implemented partially, right, for many different reasons and many different purposes that are that could represent really well what this program is all about, right? Contributing with our grain of sand to the process of creating a better world. For all I know, we may not do much, but in a world where there seems to be, you know, the desire to do a lot of good, but never to do less harm. Often all we need is a beacon of hope, right? So all of us have the power to contribute to our communities in a way that is hopeful, I believe. And that's at the very least what this program is about.
Well said.
That's
Thank you,
amazing.
Rogelio.
Good job, Rogelio. That is well said. I agree with you on almost everything. So before we transition to, that's probably a good way to end Madison's Q&A. And I want to make sure we have time. There's one question that's been asked by the audience, so I'll put that one out there. But if anybody else has a question, please pop it into the Q&A, and we'll take an extra, I know it's getting close to the time the panel is supposed to end, but we'll take an extra 5 minutes to answer questions from the audience. So the question that's in the chat right now from Shaheen Lakwandala, who works in our office at the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, is, how would you all compare the emergency responses related to COVID-19 to the types of responses necessary during other types of disasters, such as hurricanes, tornadoes, etc.? And do you see a major difference? Does anyone want to take that?
I mean, I think one major difference is that, you know, we have to be careful about congregate settings, and that is that's a huge shift, you know, where after tornadoes and hurricanes, people can rush in and they can help and they can touch and they can be present with one another. And I think that caused a very significant pause, and is one that makes people, you know, more concerned about risk, less able to contribute, especially if they're in one of those at-risk groups. High exposure can be really detrimental. So I think that's of course, one huge sort of obvious one, but
Mm-hmm.
I know we've talked about it some in terms of formal response and informal response. And I think, you know, some of that is similar. I've also wondered about the use of technology for communication and how that didn't go away for us. You know, we still have that, and really that's what we've had to lean on instead of in-person tangible connections. We've had to lean on our technological ability to communicate our needs. And if you have that, great. If you don't have that, also, you know, it reveals those inequities. So.
Thank you. Yes. Any other thoughts on that question?
I think that's a super loaded question. One main difference is the magnitude of everything, right? Like, I mean, for once, I believe, unlike any other crisis related to a hurricane or any other natural disaster, or even a particular man-made event, you know, a war or something going on, used to be that is, you know, very much located into a specific region or geographical area and certain jurisdictions. But now it is a global crisis, and what we are experiencing here in Northwest Arkansas is very much experienced around the world in more or less capacity, with a better or worse infrastructure, with access to more or less resources. So that, I think, is something to think about, because everyone is really trying to figure out ways in which we can extend the existing resources to the max, and figuring out how are we going to pay for what is coming next, right? For the effects of all these crises, not only in economic terms, but also in human terms in general, right? I mean, I was reading this morning the effects of COVID-19 related to mental illnesses and depression around the world, and the figures are alarming in many places. So that there's many unknowns of the effects, and the magnitude of it, the reach of the crisis, I think, is the main difference in general terms.
That's a great point. Thank you so much. I don't have any other questions, but I'd be curious. So most of you know, the point of the kickoff here is for us to really talk about some of the issues that the students can look at as they developed project teams and think about what they want to work on this semester. I know that's how Rogelio structures his class, and challenges the students to think about and identify a problem and create a statement and investigate and do some research and figure out a solution, or at least a proposed solution. As these students go out and tackle the problems and the challenges that they're going to look deeper into, do you guys have any words of advice on, you know, how they approach things, or because just even in listening to you guys talk about, it's all so big, right? Like, this is global. This is like nothing we've ever seen before. So any piece of advice that you have to offer the students as they think about what they want to work on, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Can I speak up on that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I was listening to a book yesterday, and the author said something about, we all have agency and we all have responsibility, just as human beings. And I'm working, not only do I work on Partners for Better Housing, but I'm working on talking to a lot of people in the region about how to scale our affordable housing efforts. And there's this strange conversation that keeps coming around of, well, you know, no one appointed me the housing czar of Northwest Arkansas. And, but that doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to have these conversations, or that given my interest and passion and experience, that I don't have some responsibility to speak up. And so I would encourage the students listening here that you do have agency and you have responsibility, and regardless of whether you have the next great idea that's going to solve all homelessness issues, or you can just do your little bit to drive around and help deliver food on Tuesday afternoons. Whatever you can do, you should do, and take some responsibility to do that. So don't let the overwhelming global nature of it deter you from action.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah. Does anybody else want to comment on that? I've got one or two more questions that have come in.
I'll add one quick thing to that. I think too, when you're looking at something, kind of like Tiffany said, really like paying attention to what sort of like ignites something in you, and then explore that and have conversations and discover what's missing, versus just looking at this problem and really talk to people. If you can find an area where there's a problem and there's something missing there, that's a great place to start. And I think that solutions evolve over time, so maybe it may be that what you come up with is maybe it doesn't end up making sense, but that's okay. It's the start that's important. And so just sort of pay attention to things that really interest you or intrigue you, and then kind of let yourself dig in and explore, and I think things will come to you. So.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. Yeah, Rogelio, did you want to say something, or?
Yeah, sure. I think that this is a learning process for everybody. If we had the answer to these problems, it is very complex, can be overwhelming, can be frustrating. But I think it's a little bit, I like to use the analogy of the orchestra of the Titanic. We need to keep playing. Not only something, there's something romantic associated with the idea of keep playing and, dying doing what you love to do. But there's also something about the decision of, despite the chaotic situation, despite the situation of urgency and chaos, to stop and decide to create some virtue, some value, some goodness in the middle of all that chaos, and regardless of the consequences, and despite the fact that the ship may sink anyway, right? But there's value in that process, and it's a learning process in which our community partners play a major role. And in the same way, don't approach it thinking that you are going to be the one through your knowledge and skill sharing a better way or a better option. It's a two-way road, and you should be there also to learn from the person in the field, to learn from the community partner, to learn from their experience, firsthand experience, frontline experience. That is invaluable, in my opinion. And then also the fact that these problems are so wicked, so ambiguous, right? It represents a challenge for those of you in management, in strategy. It represents a challenge. It's, that song, New York, New York, if I can make it here, I can make it anywhere. I think it's a little bit misleading, because, when you have all access to resources and infrastructure and all that, go to Lilongwe, Malawi, and try to make it there. And then it's a lot more difficult to make it in front of lack of infrastructure and resources. So it's a great opportunity to really polish your skills in that
Absolutely.
area.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. So we do have a few more questions that have come in, but panelists, if you guys are okay with it, I would love to share emails with the attendees, so maybe they can reach out directly with their questions, and I think some of them are very specific. One to the real estate development, so that would be for you, Tiffany, and I'll I'll share your email with the students that asked, and with all of them, if you're all right with it. I think it'd be beneficial for them to reach out and ask questions, especially as they go through their process this semester.
Absolutely, that would be great.
Great. I would love to say, I'm going to turn it back over to Madison, but I would love to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. This has been amazing. It's exactly what I was hoping it would be. So I appreciate all your perspectives and all of the thought that you put into this. We're very grateful for it. Madison?
Absolutely. Thank you, panelists. You guys gave me chills with this conversation, and I hope we inspired some students to do some good work this year. So thank you for being here. We appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.